In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 28. Everything is not as it seems. I'm Andrew Langer.
Jerry Rogers.
And, you know, it's one of those things where this could be a conspiracy theory-minded show. I'm sure it is not going to be. Or as Jerry would say, right, this is what, every day this could be the way it is, Jerry?
Every day it's not what it seems to be because of the changing of language, changing of issues, the gaslighting, the media. I'm telling you, it's as if we live in some cheap dystopian novel that's not even great reading, but so ridiculous that it could never even make it to be a Netflix show, but we're actually living it in reality.
And we're going to be joined in the next couple of weeks by Jim Carter, who works for a new think tank that's out there to talk about the recession. So we're going to talk about that today. Here's the thing, so let's get into it. We haven't done it. I want to break down the show today. I want to get into it. So let's go right into Ripped from the Headlines.
Ripped from the Headlines.
You know, on that theme, Jerry, of it being everything not being as it seems, one of the prevailing stories today, and certainly one of the prevailing stories in the media, is all of these Trump-endorsed candidates winning their primaries. So we're recording this the day after primaries in Arizona, in Missouri, in
Maryland.
Michigan, right?
Maryland.
Well, Maryland was a couple of weeks ago. And they still haven't finished counting the votes, which is crazy, by the way. But
can I comment on that real quick?
Yeah, please.
I think the best way to reassure Americans that the vote is legit is to have the vote completed over several hours, not several weeks.
It has to be.
But what is this? What is this change? When you and I were kids and we were watching the returns on whatever network was hosting it, we would know that evening who was president, who was senator, who was governor. Well, and literally have to wait weeks until declared winner.
And because one of the which is insane, right? Because we're talking about it is now 2022. This shouldn't be this hard to do. But we are still operating our elections as though we were in the middle of the pandemic. So, all right. It used to be, obviously, that you would have absentee voting, but you had to have specific reasons for voting absentee. And so we had very few absentee ballots, and very rarely would those make a difference in the election. And even if they did, there were so few of them, they could be counted immediately, right? You just go and break them open and let's go and do that. Now we've got all of this early voting and voting by mail, and early voting should also be easy because the early votes, if they're done on an actual voting machine, they could be all you go and do is tally up the voting machine. But with all of the mail-in ballots, this changes things, and so we are now back to a situation where we're now back in the early 19th century, late 18th century, where it would take weeks if folks were, to get the results because the ballot boxes had to come from somewhere.
Let me ask you a question, Andrew. Were you? Did you vote in the primary in your state?
No, because we did not have my candidate was running unopposed.
All right, so we did.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. So we went in there and I said, Gerald Rogers, and they asked me my address, and they asked me my party affiliation too, which I thought was a strange question. Well, regardless.
Well, wait. But did you have to did they handed you a paper ballot, right?
Yeah, but ostensibly it would already be listed on my entry. Well, I think because Erica wasn't asked that question.
That's weird. Okay,
So it struck. Right. So they asked Erica, "What's your name?" Erica Rogers. Your address. Here's my address. Okay, here's your ballot. I said the same thing, Gerald Rogers, my address, and he asked me my voter registration. I thought it was a strange question, but here's the thing. I asked him, I said, "You're not going to ask for my license or identification?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, how do you know I'm Gerald Rogers from my address?" He says, "Well, you know your address." Well, anyone could know my address.
Sure, of course. Yes.
And then,
the Amazon delivery guy knows your address.
And then I said, well, what if I changed addresses, or what if two Gerald Rogers come in today? He said the second Gerald Rogers would have to cast a provisional ballot. Yeah. And I said, would you ask that Gerald Rogers for an ID? He said, no. And I said, well, then at the end of the day, then how do you justify the two Gerald Rogers with no identification? Right. Which ballot do you count? He said he couldn't answer the question.
Well, and time out for a second, Jerry, because so we do have voter ID in Virginia, which is good. So I have to show ID in Virginia. But you know, it leads into, and there's a whole nother thing I wanted to talk about, but this gets into everything that we're talking about here, right? Which is, again, the redefinition of things, right? Redefining recession, redefining women. Now we're redefining, you know, on the fly who can vote at any particular point in time. It's all very fluid. But here's where I wanted to go with all of this, which is, I mean, well, actually, let's pull further on this thread, because this gets into something you and I were talking about yesterday on the phone, Jerry, with regards to COVID-19 and public policy and the undermining of public health, right? All of these things. Now, again, whether it's by design or whether it is completely unintentional, they all have the same result, which is the undermining of public confidence in major institutions. And that's a problem for the Republic. Sorry, go ahead, Jerry, because this was your thing yesterday.
It is a problem for the Republic. And the interesting thing is, and again, to one of the Andrew and Jerry rules of politics, this is something that the left has thrown out at the Republicans, that they are undermining the presidency, smashing norms. Right. And here we are in reality, and they are actually smashing norms. Look, in just the last several months, we've had the left attack the Supreme Court, the United States Senate, the Electoral College, in terms of constitutional, institutional attacks, but also they're attacking the filibuster and other such things. It's again, it's not what it seems.
There was a piece that was put out in the last couple of days. I want to say it was yesterday. Republicans are playing the long game and rewriting the Constitution, right? As though now there is the move for the convention of the states,
which is a horrible, no good, terrible idea.
But that is really about, it's not about rewriting the Constitution in the way that the Democrats want to rewrite the Constitution, but it is about buttressing certain things. I mean, at least ostensibly.
Right. The Fifth Amendment movement, is it called, or 10th Amendment movement now? I forget. Is it the 10th Amendment? Well, regardless, ostensibly it is so we could pass a balanced budget amendment.
There's the balanced budget. Yes,
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, the challenge is that once you have a convention of the states, you have no limit. You can't go into it saying we have this limited agenda. Well, once you open up a constitutional convention, anything goes.
There is some question about that, but I don't want to lose this. I mean, let's be real here. The folks there are folks who want a balanced budget amendment. Some of them want the right to keep and bear arms explicitly defined. Other folks want better definitions in terms of the Fifth Amendment and property rights. So there are things that they want to do that actually buttress and return the vision of the Constitution back to the way it was originally as a government of limited powers. What the left is conveniently forgetting is that there is a movement to redefine the Constitution in terms of individual rights and abortion rights and to get rid of the Second Amendment and to get rid of the First Amendment and all of these things. You know, I had a discussion, Jerry, over the weekend with somebody online. And yes, I swore I would not get dragged into these things, but I did. Someone had posted that proved to me that the Constitution is not satire, which is a trolling statement. But I'm like, you know something? I'll take the bait on this one. I can prove it. The person said, how? And I said, well, look at the Federalist Papers. All of that effort expended by three people with markedly different views, John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton, who had three very different approaches to constitutional governance, all advocating for the same thing and spending a lot of time and effort to convince a whole hell of a lot of people to ratify this document. And ostensibly, this person, I chatted for a while, and what it became clear is that what this person really wanted to do was they want to replace the Constitution with some, no joke, some form of elitist Stalinism founded in veganism. I mean, it was just, anyway, it was just the way it is. So but my point is to say that the left doesn't want to rewrite things. All you have to do is look at everything that the left is doing and to see that they have no right. Who was it? It's the guy from MSNBC, Elie Mystal, who says the Constitution is trash.
Yes, that's right. Yes, trash. Yep.
So the idea that this is not somehow going down the other road, but my point in raising the election issue, Jerry, talking about all of this stuff and talking about everything not being as it seems, is that one of the prevailing themes in the leftist media this morning is that a bunch of election deniers won last night. Trump supporters, the cult of Trump is still alive and well, and a bunch of election deniers, however that term gets defined, won their primaries last night. Completely ignoring that, setting aside choices in primaries, the reality is, and we saw this in Maryland certainly, Democrats are spending huge sums of money to ensure that Trump supporters or those that Trump supported get elected, and those who have raised some legitimate, some illegitimate questions about the election of 2020, that those folks are winning their elections. And so to sort of proffer this idea that, generically that the cult of Trump is alive and well, and ignoring the fact that Democrats are pumping huge sums of money to make sure that the cult of Trump is alive and well, that is again part and parcel of this idea that everything is not quite as it seems, right?
Of course, it also shows that the left doesn't hold the moral high ground. You cannot say that candidate X endorsed by Trump is a danger to democracy,
right,
and then you invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into making sure candidate X is on the ballot.
Yeah.
And that's number one. Number two, there are a handful of Democrats who are trying to call this out. Axelrod, President Obama's chief strategist. What's his first name? Axelrod's first name?
Isn't it Mark Axelrod?
Yeah. Well, anyway, he's been very, very clear on this. But here's the
David Axelrod. Sorry,
David Axelrod. But here's the challenge, though, and that is, this is a tactic that is used often in politics. You try to promote the weaker candidate.
Yes.
Famously in Missouri, Senator McCaskill, right, had put money into the Republican primary to make sure it was a Todd Aiken that wackadoo was the candidate, and he was. The difference today is that this isn't promoting, again, put on your I'm a Democrat, I'm a progressive hat. They're not promoting the candidates per se. They're promoting an agenda. They're promoting a way of thinking that they believe is dangerous to the republic. And so, again, how can you believe anything a Democrat says when the Democrat says that Donald Trump is a danger to the republic? He's denied the election. He's an election denier, the big lie.
Right.
And then you go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get his platform to the top of the ticket in several states.
And at some point in time, that boomerangs against them, right?
You would think so.
Yeah.
But here's the problem: no one holds the Democrats to account.
Right. Right.
I mean, look. We're in the midst now of this Chuck Schumer, Joe Manchin deal, the reduction. The Inflation
Reduction Act
has nothing to do with reducing inflation. Right. In fact, it's going to spike energy prices and costs to consumers. It's going to limit access in terms of health care. It is a horrible, no good, bad piece of legislation, and yet not one reporter, for instance, Chuck Todd, or Jake Tapper, they have Joe Manchin on the program, and no one asks Joe Manchin or any other supporter, by the way, you're going to limit access to medicines for seniors. Do you think this is a worthwhile cost saving? Even ask the question.
Yeah, no,
no one asked the question. How is this going to, when you dump $740 billion into the economy? We know that the government spending, government dollars is what helps spike inflation. Well, how will this reduce inflation? No one asked the question.
I don't know. I want to come back to that. Good. I don't want to leave this election stuff yet, because we were talking about Maryland.
But answering your question, will a boomerang? No, it won't.
No. Well, I mean, no, it won't.
Because there's no one to hold them accountable.
It will help in terms of talking points. I want to come back to that. One of the things that gets me, and because we haven't talked about this since, well, I guess we talked about it a little since the Maryland primary. It part and parcel of all of this is it's the opposite of magical thinking. It is the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you are someone who refuses to endorse once you lose a primary, or you refuse to support somebody because they won their primary and your candidate lost, and then you're out there proclaiming to the high heavens that candidate can't win. Well, yeah, that's the way it works. It's along the lines of when they passed Obamacare, saying, okay, we're gonna mandate that everybody has to get this product, and we're going to offer massive subsidies for you to buy this product if you can't afford it. You can't then turn around and tout as a measurement of success when people buy that product. I mean, that's not the way it works. It's not a measurement of success. And so I'm deeply bothered by this. Disappointed obviously in my friend Kelly Schultz. Because she cannot run for office again.
Yeah, Kelly Schultz, of course, is was the Hogan pick, his successor for governor in the state of Maryland, and she ran a absentee campaign.
And I see. Okay, I don't think she ran an absentee campaign.
Of course, she did.
Well, I don't think she did. I
defend that though.
Well, because she was out there. She was.
No, she wasn't.
Yes, she was. She was out there meeting people. She was doing events.
Andrew, she had in the business Rose Garden campaign. She would show up every so often at someone's house or at some kind of event that was staged.
She was out there doing hand pressing.
No, she never did any. No pancake breakfasts. None of that.
Well, no. Okay, you and I are looking at it two different ways. I mean, I think she was out there pressing the flesh at metro stations. I think
she was. That's my whole point. She wasn't.
No, I believe she was. But my point is this, Jerry. No.
I don't understand. Jerry, I don't understand how you can say that when she literally wasn't at the train stations.
I believe she was, Jerry. I've seen pictures of her at train stations shaking hands with people.
So that's my point. That's called a rose garden. So you go to one train station, you take a couple of pics, and then you send it out.
But Jerry, I all right. You're saying you defining this as I don't know offhand if she did pancake breakfast, and it's one sort of definition of looking at this. But you're missing the greater point here, right? The greater point is that Larry Hogan should have been out there doing this.
And he was absentee. That's the whole thing. He wasn't even in town. Even on election day, he was in Colorado.
I'm Kelly Schultz, this is my point. If I'm Kelly Schultz and I have hitched my wagon to this star that is clearly flagging, and empirically, she has to know that Larry Hogan is never going to be president of the United States.
But you and I have talked about this, and that is there is this very strange cult of Hogan, in certain circles in the GOP in Maryland. As small as that is, Larry Hogan said last week or in the last couple of weeks that Republicans are 20% of the electorate, and only X percentage showed up on primary day. So really, only 2% of Marylanders chose Dan Cox, the winner of the Republican primary, only 2% of voters supported Dan Cox. And again, my thinking is there's a 2-to-1, 2.5-to-1 advantage for Democrats. So why are you doing everything to hurt Republicans? Remember this: Dan Cox is running, but there's also down ticket.
But back to the central point, which is again about the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
If there are only, a handful of Republicans voting in the primary, what are you doing, Mr. Governor, to make this happen, to change this? You are the person responsible for this. And so I guess what I come back to is you're right. I mean, some of this has to do with the cult of Hogan, and we've seen this with, friends of ours who are sort of
there are people, I think, in the state of Maryland close to the governor who believe the governor is going to become president, as ridiculous as that might sound. But
in the end, right, if I'm Kelly Schultz and I've had this moment where I have been essentially, okay, I'm not going to say humiliated. Let's just say
she got crushed. She was crushed
at the polls,
crushed
in this election. I've got to be thinking, why am I looking? And I'll say this too. I think Kelly Schultz is smarter than Larry Hogan. Right. And frankly,
except Larry Hogan got himself elected.
Well, okay, but
she couldn't.
Remember, but Larry Hogan, folks have to remember, Larry Hogan did two things. Yes, Larry Hogan built that grassroots organization, which he didn't do anything with once he became governor.
Right.
Certainly didn't do anything to help Kelly Schultz. But the other part of this is Larry Hogan was running against two incompetent candidates. One, arguably the successor candidate, more incompetent than the prior one.
Not to overfocus on Maryland politics,
sure.
but the fact of the matter is Dan Cox is a flawed candidate, and Kelly Schultz couldn't get within 10 points of him.
Yes, but again, right, because the governor didn't do anything to capitalize on that enormous popularity.
Yes, that's
to
true.
Get out there. And remember, looking at it, keep in mind, and Peter Franchot, again, we don't want to focus too much on Maryland. This is the last thing I think we'll say about this. Peter Franchot suffered from this as well, which is, if you look at what the electorate is thinking, the majority of Marylanders think the state was on the wrong track.
Yeah, and also when that happens, there's a broader point here that you can apply to national politics or to regardless of where our listeners are from. In Maryland, this is a good lesson for those who follow politics. In Maryland, all the polling leading up to both the Democrat primary and the Republican primary, all the polling had a huge segment of the primary voter public undecided.
Yes.
And so when you go into so if Kelly Schultz was the favorite, Peter Franchot was the favorite, when you have better than 10% of the electorate undecided, that's telling you that the so-called establishment favorite is going to lose.
Yeah.
And that's true, which is why I worry when I see these national Senate races where you have like in Pennsylvania. My goodness, the Republican candidate, Dr. Oz, he is unable to beat right now, the polling in Pennsylvania is terrible. Why? Because Dr. Oz cannot take a principled stand. The guy he's running against is in the hospital recovering from a stroke.
Yeah.
And my point is, and this was Kelly Schultz's problem, this is also a Republican problem largely, and that is you have to have the courage of your convictions.
Absolutely.
If you're pro-life, pro-gun, be it. If you're not, then don't be it. And the problem with Kelly Schultz was that she was afraid to take any strong position on issues that matter to the Republican voter.
And that's just it. And to find in a year in which the Republicans are being motivated by a lot of these cultural issues and how we're focusing on things in the post-pandemic world, namely education. Right. And you and I have talked about this. The way that Dan Cox wins, if he's going to have any chance of winning, is to get involved in the local school board races and going.
And I think that's true for any Republican candidate. Again, you started this segment off talking about how the primaries and in several instances on the Senate side, on the House side, pro-Trump Trump endorsed candidates have won the day.
Yeah.
For them, the race has to be about local issues, and it has to be, I would argue right now, the biggest issue for swing voters is the failed public school system, and how the public schools are about indoctrination and not about critical thinking. That's the key to win swing voters.
Well, about indoctrination and also how they failed our students during the pandemic.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah. So
again, can you believe? So Erica, on her Facebook memories today, wrote something about, no, you and I were doing a podcast.
Okay.
And the podcast was about one of the topics we covered 10 years ago, 2 years ago, rather.
Feels like 10 years ago.
2 years ago, was that in Montgomery County, the Democrats were trying to keep the private schools from reopening. And I can't believe it's only been 2 years. And the fact that teacher unions and mostly Democrats kept our schools closed should be, everyone should be leading with that issue. And unfortunately, a lot of folks aren't.
Well, you know, it's interesting because some of this comes down to message discipline and be able to focus on things without having the media distract and derail you.
Also, Andrew, you make a brilliant point here. It's message discipline. It's also the fact that there are so many hangers on. All of these less than talented political consultants.
Yes, the consultant
who get hired by these congressional candidates and they offer the worst kind of inside the beltway. Make no mistake, it's like a prevent defense in football strategy, and you always lose. Always. I remember, look, just one personal story. I worked for a guy in '96, and back then the big issue, believe it or not, in swing districts was the federal minimum wage. Part of my stutter.
It's all right.
And essentially, it was to raise the wage by a dime. It wasn't. And my guy, we had a union district, and he was neither here nor there. He was afraid to say no because the Republicans and that sort of thing, his base, but afraid to say yes, or vice versa, right? And I remember him holding, being on the fence. And I was 27 at the time, and I said to him, as a congressman, you have to just take a position. Take a position and stick to it. I said, because either way, they're going to kill you on this.
Yeah. And
the longer you wait, it won't make a difference what your position is. And I remember him telling me, what do you know? I've hired so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. By the way, our friend, Kelly Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
Was on that campaign.
Interesting.
And she was one of our pollsters. And anyway, long story short, he eventually endorsed the measure, and he still got clobbered. He still got clobbered with he wouldn't give a dime to working men, working women. And even though then he took the position so late, he ended up getting clobbered by conservatives who wouldn't vote for him. Yeah. So because he didn't take it, now regardless, he should have taken a stand one way or the other and then just defended it. Part of the problem here is that Republican consultants will not let their candidates take positions, which then hurts them in the general election.
So I want to hold on. I want to open this.
That was frankly, that was as you're looking for this. Yeah. That was the I think the last nail in the coffin that got Kelly Schultz defeated in Maryland when the Dobbs decision came out, and she was asked, and she just equivocated in the weakest manner. And Cox gave a very straightforward. Cox's answer was,
I've said,
I joined politics, got involved in politics because I'm pro-life. Well, her response was, well, as governor, I won't do a thing.
Well, but it was that, and then but again, it gets down to what you're saying about sort of this defense offense kind of way of looking at it, which is, as we've talked about, Kelly has a very compelling life story with regards to this, and she should have led with,
yes,
I
have been in this circumstance.
Yeah, yes. So
don't lecture me, Mr. Media Person. Don't lecture me. Don't
Right.
give me a leading question. Let me tell you what it's like to be a single mom. Let me tell you what it's like to be in it.
That's
So
exactly,
don't, how
that's exactly
dare you,
it.
how dare you ask me this question to somehow imply that I'm not in tune with the women of Maryland. Shame on you. But that wasn't a
Right.
response.
Oh, and by the way, love the supposedly pro-life activists who are going to refuse to support Dan Cox going into this election. But let's say here's where I'm going to go. Getting back to what you were talking about in terms of what's going on in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Here is John Fetterman talking about men playing in
Yes.
men playing in women's sports. Let me go here.
This is Pennsylvania U.S. Senate race.
Yeah.
Do you believe women should be allowed to play on women's sports teams at the youth through college level?
Yes.
Do you believe transgender women should be allowed to play on women's sports teams at the youth through college level?
Yes.
Do you
There we
believe?
go. All right. Well, and I guess they repeat that a couple of different times.
Well, again, I'm
right.
interested to know this. Is that from the Oz campaign, or is that just out there in conservative media?
No, it's not from the Oz campaign. That's from the RNC.
All right. Well, again, why
yeah.
isn't Dr. Oz going from gas station to diner to beer store? That's something too. Is if you want to win in Pennsylvania, hell, if you want to win in Western Maryland, you got to go to the places where your voters are.
Yeah,
you got to go. Dr. Oz needs to be at. You and I talked about this once before.
yes.
When we talked about if a Democrat was to beat Donald Trump.
Yes.
This was before the pandemic hit. And you and I talked about how a conservative Democrat or a working person's Democrat could win by just going to all the VFW halls and the dive bars and the gas station restaurants. And we have even in Western Maryland, you go to a gas station. At the gas station, it's the post office and the pizza shop.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
that's where Dr. Oz needs to be. That's where Herschel Walker needs to be. That's where all these Republican candidates for U.S. Senate, who the mainstream establishment says are weak candidates, they need to get out of the shadow of their consultants and get to where the swing voter is.
Right. Well, not even the swing voter. I mean, the swing voters, the independent voters, but also you've got to make sure that you're making that your base is energized enough to get out and win these elections. And that's otherwise, again, it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy.
And the thing is, too, is no Republican is going to win with a cookie cutter Rose Garden campaign where you have limited contact with the actual voters.
Right.
You got to roll your sleeve. I have a question for you. I've been thinking about this, and I'm not sure. We don't really have a script, but there was a time in our lifetimes, Andrew, where if a local politician showed up, it was neither here nor there. Maybe you liked him, maybe you didn't, but there was no visceral, angry, or any kind of like cultish response to it. And I say this because, again, there was a time when, like in New York City, if Ed Koch showed up someplace, whether you liked him or not, politically, you liked Ed Koch. He was a good guy.
Of course.
We didn't today. I mean, if I were run for office, I'd be afraid to show up at these parades because it demeans the presence of the politician, demeans the parade. My is that I went to a 4th of July celebration, fireworks. It was great fun. A go-go band, a DC go-go band was playing, and but then the politicians showed up.
Yeah,
the county council and Mark Earlrich, who is the Democrat county executive, and it just put a damper. Like what's he doing here? And he talked about Dobbs' decision, and he talked about the Supreme Court. And I'm like, why is he here saying these things
on the 4th of July?
On the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And again, if I were running a campaign today, I'd run it so different than how we ran campaigns in the 90s. I wouldn't do the parades. I wouldn't do 4th of July festivals.
But wait, time out for a second, because this is what we're just talking about here. So, I mean, but essentially, how is that different than what Kelly Schultz did then?
No, because that's what she did do. She went to these kind of cookie cutter events.
Rose Garden cookie cutter events.
Yeah. What I would do is if I were Kelly Schultz or any Republican candidate, I would go to the dive bars. I'd go to the VFW halls.
Sure, I get it.
With no press, just with my people. Let me buy you a beer. I'd go to where people are, not so much where these events are held.
Listen, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this because we could go down. You don't think that would also be seen as intrusive in the same way that Mark Elbert's showing up at a 4th of July event? You know, if Kelly Schultz showed up at a dive bar in Western Maryland, that folks might think that was a little odd.
But that's not odd. But if she couldn't show up at a dive bar, then she'd know that she shouldn't be running for office.
Yes, I mean, listen, I think
you know what I mean.
No, well, kind of, yeah. I mean, I'm understanding what you're saying. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with it. I think, but to me, I think it comes down to you have to be genuine, right? And that's I think.
Yes. Yes.
I think that is part of the difference is
yes,
that folks
that's right.
Can spot a phony and folks can spot a politician. You have to be who you are, and you can't put on a facade for the general public.
Also, I mean, look, in the state of Maryland, the bottom line is that Larry Hogan had zero coattails when he took office in 2015. There were 51 delegates, Republican delegates in the state house. When he ran 4 years later, they lost 9 seats. They had their drive for 5 to get 5 additional senators, so it wouldn't be a veto-proof majority in the state Senate, and they couldn't do it.
Right.
And so, for Kelly Schultz, I've been critical of how she campaigned, but to your point, I think you get it mostly right in terms of why she lost, and that is, I think Hogan was a drag.
Well, Hogan was a drag, and but I think you're also correct in the fact that she was very badly advised.
Yes.
Running a defense-offense strategy was not going to win this election.
And this is true again for our listeners in New York, New Jersey, and everywhere else. If the Republican candidate can't win by playing prevent defense,
right? You
got to get in there and engage. And you're right. You got to pick your issues. And even if your issue is controversial or somehow provocative defined by the mainstream media, stick to it.
Right.
Stick to your guns.
And yes, you have to believe what you believe and be able to articulate.
And this is why I think the left rolls us in terms of these big cultural fights, is because they actually believe what they say.
Yes, and it's magnified by the popular press around.
Let me ask you another question,
please.
And again, but there are a lot of Republicans who have gone, or conservatives who have gone. Trump broke their brains. We talked about this.
Yeah.
Michael Steele, Bill
Kristol,
David French, and others. I mean,
Jonah Goldberg.
Jonah Goldberg. Yes. What is it? What is it? Is it that they weren't really true believers, and this is just now exposing them? Because how do you change? Bill Kristol supports Joe Biden. How do you go from being a conservative, pro-life, support the Bill of Rights to supporting
a couple of different disturbing trends that are out there right now? Which
is money?
No, I mean, listen, you've talked about this, and we've talked about folks who want to be accepted on the cocktail circuit. I think there's part of it, but it's also, we do not allow people to be wrong, and we don't allow people to change their opinion on things. If they do, then they're considered flip-floppers. There was this whole discussion over the weekend about the PACT bill, the burn pits bill, and how Republicans in the Senate voted for it.
I'm glad you raised this issue, because it's such I'm part of my language. It's such a bullshit bill.
Right. But I mean, is
Republicans, just for our audience, because
please, we don't want to.
Our audience. This is a piece of legislation that would help.
Ostensibly help
veterans and and victims of
let me
9/11.
hold on. Let me dial it back a little bit real quick, because there's an important bit of history here. I spent a lot of time talking about Jonathan Turley, the
Yes.
GW law professor. And the first time I met Jonathan Turley was back in the 90s. I was working for a lawyer who had been the assistant attorney general in charge of the environment division at the Justice Department. And Jonathan Turley was suing the federal government. He was a professor at GW, but he was suing the federal government over at Area 51. Talk about conspiracy theories. Area 51 is a closed base. And in fact, I don't know if you know this, Jerry. Do you know that if you work at Area 51, you can't drive there?
Yeah.
So every day there is a plane that leaves from what used to be McCarran Airport in Las Vegas, an unmarked commercial jet, and people get on and they fly to Area 51 in the afternoon. They fly home, and so nothing comes off. And this is the base where, listen, all conspiracy theories aside, where they developed stealth technology. Lockheed Martin Skunk Works had a facility there, and everything on that base would get burned. Any waste material would get burned. They didn't truck it anywhere. They would douse it all in jet fuel and set it on fire. And as it happens, this stuff is incredibly toxic when it's burned. And so the workers who were there, they got sick. Several of them died, and Jonathan Turley represented them in court. And Jerry, it was a crazy case. This is how I first heard about it, because the very first affirmative defense on the part of the federal government was, we deny that the facility exists and you can't prove otherwise.
It's funny. Well, real quick, just tell us what this bill does.
So the point is that this situation has been replicated elsewhere, in that when there are military facilities and stuff is secret, or they're in a war zone somewhere, they will dump waste materials and they will set it on fire and they will burn it. Right. And people got sick. And so what this bill would do is it would wholesale compensate. I don't know about you, Jerry, but I'm seeing ads now on TV, or you at Camp Lejeune when
but here's the problem with this.
It's supposed to compensate. Yes, go ahead.
And again, who's the celebrity that is the big spokesperson
Jon
now?
Stewart.
So Jon Stewart's all over the news on this. But here's the problem. The mainstream media, right, and the Democrats working together say, shame on you, Republicans. You vote against a piece of legislation that will offer additional health care to our veterans.
But hold on, Jerry, but it starts with, you voted for it first and then you flip-flopped on it.
Right. But the problem is, and this is, again, if we had an honest media, the problem is that the Democrats loaded this thing up with all kinds of peripheral spending and special interest spending and political junk that some Republicans had to vote, as a matter of principle, had to vote no on it.
Yeah.
So again, it just shows you just how dishonest our public discussion is, because you can't even get at the truth. Everything is a slogan. You're against veterans because you voted against this.
But to get back back to your question, which is that if you change your opinion on something, and the opinion changes goes against what the prevailing progressive mores are, then that's a problem. Let's not forget, right, that part of the issue with the leak of the Dobbs decision was that they wanted to bring pressure on at least one, if not several, members of the Supreme Court to change their votes on this. It's okay to try to get Brett Kavanaugh to change his vote on Dobbs, but not okay when when Pat Toomey votes one way and then decides to vote a different way down the road. And so,
although this is not. I mean, Bill Kristol hasn't changed his mind on a single issue. Bill Kristol has changed his mind on a political philosophy.
This is my point: is that Bill Kristol and Michael Steele, they don't think that they can admit that they were wrong. If they admit that they're wrong, it's the end of their careers. We don't allow in American society today the ability for a politician or a pundit to say, something, either A, I was wrong, or B, my opinion changed over time, right? And
although I mean, more or less, I mean, maybe me more than you. That's what we did. I was a loud. It's so funny.
But Jerry, I think that's what sets us apart in terms of being honest brokers, right? Jerry, yes, Jerry. I was a Trump agnostic, and very skeptical. Jerry was anybody but Trump up until about a week before the election, and then we wrote that op-ed.
Right. But the funny thing is, if you were to chart my Trumpiness, it would be like anti-Trump, 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 against the anti-Trumpers.
Sure.
So I was anti-Trump, then anti-Trumper, to then pro-Trump. But now, again, I'm back in my God bless him, but please don't run again.
Sure.
Someone else has to step up. I wouldn't say I'm anti-Trump, but I am Trump weary.
Yes, and part of that is by design. Well, again, I'm not necessarily agnostic. I would prefer somebody other than Trump to be at the head of the ticket in 2024.
Yes.
But that does not mean that I don't like Trump or I would not support Trump if he ran.
Well, I didn't say that, right?
Exactly.
I also think that an 81-year-old, how old will Joe Biden be in 2024?
I have no idea. I don't know.
He's 79 now. He'll be 80. He'll be 80, 81.
Yeah.
Right? Or something like he'll be in his 80s. Do we really need a 78-year-old running against an 80-year-old for president? I mean, we don't have. Think about this for a second. I thought about
Jerry. Remember, Joe Biden will never exploit Donald Trump's youth and inexperience for his.
I thought about this because I read the New York Post every day, and Jerry Nadler, right, who's been in Congress for 30 years,
Top of the hut,
is in a primary now with Caroline Mahoney, another big Democrat. The districts have merged.
Wow.
And they had a debate recently, and Jerry Nadler is so old.
How old is he, Jerry?
He had to sit. He had to sit on the stage, and he looked like a Yoda or something.
Job of the Hut.
And he couldn't answer questions. He was asked questions and couldn't remember what the question was. And this is a guy who's in his on the edge of 80.
Sure.
And I'm thinking to myself, take that, combine that and we have Nancy Pelosi. And by the way, bravo to Nancy Pelosi for going to Taiwan.
Right.
It was the right thing to do.
100%.
Yes. Although she too speaks in gibberish now. She's 80 years old. There are clips this week of her trying to articulate certain issues and put sentences together, and it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
So we have a president who has limited capacity in terms of his mental abilities. We have a Speaker of the House who is out to lunch. God bless her. She's right to go to Taiwan, but she is out to lunch.
Sure.
And then most of our members of Congress are like Jerry Nadler.
Do you think?
They don't know what day it is.
Do you think if Republicans take control of the House and Nancy Pelosi is not Speaker, do you think she steps down? Do you think she steps down and then the way paves the way for somebody to get appointed in her stead? I mean, to me, that's what I would do.
No. You mean steps down before her gavel is taken from her?
Well,
like, will she give the gavel up to who? Steny Hoyer? He's 81.
No. This is what I'm saying. No, this is my point. Is that she's going to give up? She's going to, in all likelihood, she's going to lose the gavel. So once that happens, once Kevin McCarthy becomes Speaker of the House in January, do you think she then steps down and gets somebody to appoint? She sort of goes gentle into that good night, as Dylan Thomas would say.
No,
I agree with you.
It's not in her.
I think it's a shame.
Look, she's usually when you lose them.
Hold on, Jerry. She goes back to California to spend more time drinking with her husband.
What happened to Newt Gingrich or other speakers of the House when they lost a majority? They actually resigned their seats.
Yes, well, certainly, right.
She stayed on as minority leader.
Yeah, this is what happened with was it Tip O'Neill in '94? Who was it? No, because Tip O'Neill was
no. It was Speaker. Wright. It was Speaker Wright.
No. It was somebody from Washington State.
Foley.
Yes, Tom Foley.
Yes,
was Speaker in '94.
He lost his seat though.
Oh, that's
Nethercutt.
Right. Part of the upset.
Yeah, Nethercutt beat him. Wow, how old are we? We remember old. That race. I mean, that's
we ought to, something. We ought to come election time.
Yeah,
because were you in New Jersey on election night 1994?
1994, I was in. Oh, goodness. Yes, I was in. Right. I was. Yes, I was.
I will tell. Let me take a moment of personal privilege and tell this story.
Yeah.
94, I was working for the blind attorney. who happened to be, and he happened to be, we had a lot of folks on
Was
our
he a
office.
terrorist, the Blind Sheik? You worked for
Yes,
the Blind Sheik?
Is that in that movie, The Kingdom?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. The guy who lost his fingers is
Claw.
Yes. So we had a lot of politically connected attorneys on our team, including a gentleman named Ken Melman. And a bunch of folks were going off. I was not particularly engaged in what was happening with Congress. And I got invited to go to some kind of an RNC party that night. I didn't go. I instead went and hung out. Do you remember Buffalo Billiards on DuPont Circle?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I was at Buffalo Billiards with.
There's one, by the way, in Arlington as well.
It was still there because the Buffalo Billiards is gone.
No.
So went to Buffalo Billiards and then went to a party at a friend's house and a bunch of Democrats watching the election returns come in, and it was fascinating to watch their expressions as the Democrats lost their control of Congress for the first time in 45 years at that point.
Yeah, that's right.
It was insane. Yeah, that was, and by the way, I vowed at that point that I was never going to spend an election night with members of the other party ever again.
Now, in the 90s, I was working for either members of Congress or for state representatives. So I was always at some kind of Republican, party in those days. And in those days, we were winning races.
Yeah.
In New Jersey, Christine Todd Whitman beat
for what it's worth,
beat Florio, and then when I was in Jersey, Republicans, because, and again, this goes to the point of how things have changed. So Democrat Governor Florio, he was a boxer. This was really a blue collar Democrat, and I've met him several times, and he was a good guy. He raised the sales tax in New Jersey by 1 cent,
yes,
5 cents to 6 cents.
Yes,
and there was a taxpayer revolt. They TP'd the state house. That's because and that really,
by the way, that would be considered an act of domestic terrorism today.
Right.
Go ahead.
And there was this county freeholder who had by a stroke of luck won the Republican nomination for governor.
I remember
no one thought that Florio would lose. He was very popular. And Christine Todd Whitman, by a fluke, got the nomination, and she won by like 20,000 votes.
Yeah,
it was a squeaker, but nonetheless, she won, but brought with her a veto-proof majority in both the House and the Senate. And Republicans, for a short while, were kings and queens of New Jersey. My point is that since that time, Republican consultants don't believe that there could be that kind of voter unrest to really sweep in. And I know we talked about it already, but I think in states like Maryland, if the Hogan heroes got behind Dan Cox, stranger things have happened.
Well, this is right. And yes, I agree with that. But this is, this to me is the real damning lesson of how the Obama administration and the Democrats dealt with the Tea Party movement and what's happening today, because it ties into this other story. I don't know if you've seen this leaked FBI document about symbols of domestic terrorism. You heard about this?
Yeah, I did. Here's another thing too: is the FBI is so corrupt. The DOJ is so politicized. Yeah.
But time out for a second. Again, yes, because the seeds of what we saw in 2016 had been played out in the post-2010 election time, and really 2009 into 2010. Sure. The Obama administration used the organs of government to discredit and denigrate the major political opposition movement, the Tea Party movement, right? Yeah. They used, and again, it wasn't just the IRS, but it was using a reporting apparatus of the White House. It went so far as to, and I've talked about this on the air, it went so far as to, they spent money at the National Cancer Institute to produce a report to discredit the Tea Party movement. Anyway, so you had that during the Obama administration. Then going into the 2016 election, it was Russia, 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 and the relationship between MAGA and Russia. And then right after that, for the next 4 years, it was about the relationship between the Trump administration and the Proud Boys and white supremacists and white extremism. And so now you get to the point today, right, where now it's January 6th and election deniers and the big lie.
Right.
And then you get the FBI releasing, and I can pull it up in a second, the FBI releasing a list of symbols, Jerry, of extremism, of which included in this is I don't know, you can't see it because I have a fake background. But normally I've got my "Don't Tread on Me" sign, which I guess is now a symbol of white supremacy. All of the stuff that that I got during the Tea Party movement, the Gadsden flag.
But again, this goes back to the start of the program, and that is they're redefining and changing the meaning. Look, we've kind of been all over the place here, but just to kind of bring this to a head, so to speak. We're in a recession, but yet we're told by the media and by the new economic
We haven't got into that
economic class that we're not really in a recession.
Yes.
There's big celebrations over this Al Qaeda leader that was killed in Afghanistan, but no one's talking about how the only reason why he's in Afghanistan is because we surrendered and fled Afghanistan.
Also, by the way, at the home of a New York Times contributor.
Yeah, and also remember too, Joe Biden said that there is no way that the Taliban would take control in Afghanistan. They did within days. And secondly, he promised no way will the Taliban be connected to and working with Al Qaeda. Well, there's Al Qaeda's leader is in Afghanistan. So, but you don't hear anyone talking about how the fact that we killed him in Afghanistan. I'm glad he's dead. And in terms of he's an enemy of the United States and has blood on his hands. But the fact of the matter is he should never have been where he was.
Yes.
But again, we're redefining. We're being gaslit. Again, this mansion, I can't tell you in all my years in watching politics. I'm going to say something here that maybe I'm exaggerating to make a point, but I'm not so sure. This piece of legislation is worse than Obamacare in terms of how it will disrupt the economy. The energy, Green New Deal aspects of this bill will make it more expensive for working Americans to heat their homes, cool their homes, and travel. And the thing is that prices are already through the roof. So these added regulations and taxes that will increase energy costs, we won't even know it. Yeah. This is it. It's almost as if the inflation, the 9.1% inflation, is a cover for these guys to go in and do all kinds of mischief because prices are already high.
Right.
And secondly, what this bill would, what the Joe Manchin deal will do, will limit access for senior citizens in Medicare. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has made it very clear. And again, this is a nonpartisan. In fact, it probably leans left. Congressional Budget Office said that the only way for the federal government to see any savings in Medicare vis-a-vis this striking non-interference, or what the Democrats call negotiation. Medicare doesn't negotiate. Medicare interferes in prices. And so when you strike the interference clause, you allow Medicare to set prices, price controls. And the CBO has said that the only savings, if there were to be savings, is if you deny access to medicines to seniors. And so literally what this bill will do is take whole classes of medicine and make them unavailable to senior citizens. And you might say, well, I'm not a senior citizen. I get my insurance in the private market. And well, guess what? Medicare sets the tone for formularies and prices in the rest of the market. So what we're talking about here is at a time when we're talking about vaccines and new vaccines and boosters and pandemics, we are going to stifle investment in innovative therapies and cures and medicines because of this Joe Manchin deal. And the thing is, not one journalist, and frankly, Andrew, outside of Real Clear Health, National Review, all the conservative, the American Great, you name the Federalist, no one has covered this issue at all. And so, which makes me think that there's so many of us who just don't understand what actually happens in DC.
Listen, I think that's true. Listen, I think our good friend Phil Kerpen is on top of this, thankfully, and I know Phil's been writing.
I saw Phil. Phil tweeted out something, but I mean, and I know Phil. It's a matter of bandwidth. We have Phil Kerpen and Real Clear Health, and they have ABC, NBC, CNN, and all the rest of it.
Right. Hey, I want to come back to this. So this is a piece that was released in the last couple of days. It's ostensibly from the FBI Domestic Terrorism Symbols Guide. FBI internal use only, unclassified, law enforcement sensitive.
Can you blow this up a little bit, because you can't really see the symbols?
Something. Let me see what I can do.
Because by looking at this, it looks like it's the "Don't Tread on Me." Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So it says, for those of you listening, the following symbols are used by anti-government or anti-authority violent extremists, specifically what they call militia violent extremists.
Actually, go back, buddy. I'm sorry. I apologize. You can't see the bottom of it.
No. I'm going to have to scroll down. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm reading this thing. But what I love is widespread use of symbols and quotes from American history. Especially the Revolutionary War exists within MVE networks. So now, if you quote Patrick Henry, "Give me liberty or give me death," that is now somehow evidence of militia violent extremists. So the symbols that they have are something called Boogaloo. I don't know what that is. Never heard about that. The Punisher skull I've seen. Warrior culture. Anarcho-capitalism. Apparently now the Second Amendment and folks who put "you can have my gun when you pry it from my cold dead hands." That's evidence of militia violent extremism. I saw somebody at the grocery store yesterday with a Molon Labe shirt. Molon Labe is Greek for "come and take it." But then you get down here, commonly referenced historical imagery or quotes. The Gadsden flag, the Revolutionary War imagery.
So any imagery from the Revolutionary War is now considered by the Department of Justice, the FBI, to be a symbol for
militia violent extremism. Yes,
this
that's
is
exactly
insane.
it. Yeah.
Now tell me this isn't the government redefining history and redefining language and terms.
Which is a good point. And also the Betsy Ross flag is on here for those of you who can't see it. But that's
the Liberty Tree.
Yeah, I mean we talk about this, right? Everything is not as it seems.
Well, and again, but this is what gets me crazy over this, and that is, so where are the Republican members of Congress? They should have press. Again, we are led by morons. You got to pick a battle, right, and you got to stick to it until you push, until you get some resolution. And here's the thing: Kevin McCarthy, by the way, I'll say it now, will be an absolute horror as Speaker of the House. This is a do-nothing congressman from California who, by the stroke of luck, became majority leader.
Right. He's no Jim Jordan. He's no Steve Scalise.
No, not at all. And I've met with him, back in the day. I remember meeting with Kevin McCarthy's staff on a piece of legislation that would give investors incentives to invest in startup firms. McCarthy couldn't care less about it.
Yeah.
And again, not understanding how free enterprise works, not understanding, no curiosity. Now, Pat, what was his name? The Speaker of the House,
Paul Ryan.
Now, Paul Ryan, technocrat. Many conservatives dislike that he did the omnibus spending bills, but at least Paul Ryan was intellectually curious.
Sure.
And he was someone who cared about ideas. Now, maybe that ultimately was what was his downfall, that he got stuck in ideas. But the fact of the matter is, the FBI is telling its agents internally that the Liberty Tree, that the Revolutionary War imagery, that the "Don't Tread on Me" flag are symbols of hate.
Which, by the way,
Republican members of Congress should every single day have some kind of event to expose the FBI for this politicization every day.
Which, by the way, a lot of folks are not tracking with this. In 4 years, we will have the 250th anniversary of the United States of America.
By the way, you know what they're calling it?
The sesquicentennial.
Is that what they're calling it?
Yeah.
I heard that it was something different, but okay.
What
good.
did you what,
Someone told me, and it's I can't even pronounce what this person.
What do you call a
No, wrong question.
Yeah.
The question is what is America's 250th anniversary or something like that?
Okay. Wait, okay, well, how is that different than the question that I'm asking?
Because yours was broad.
Oh, I said the semi-quincentennial.
Yes.
Semi-quincentennial.
That's bizarre.
Well, but that's what it is. I mean, it's because, okay, let me explain. A quincentennial is 500 years.
500, of course, yeah.
So a semi-quincentennial is 250 years.
Why can't you just use a Latin term for 250?
Because I don't know.
Right?
Well, why do you think that would be? Why do you think that would be better? All right. How do you? Is it Latin or is that Greek?
What are we going to call the 300th anniversary if we make
that
it?
Would be
far?
Okay. Now that's it. Now, okay. Now it's interesting you say that. Because, okay, true story here.
Oh boy.
Okay. So when I went to William and Mary as a freshman, William and Mary was on the precipice of celebrating its 300th anniversary.
Oh, very nice.
Okay. My class was the 300th anniversary class. So William and Mary founded in 1693. I was graduating in 1993. And I would have assumed that you would have called it a tricentennial.
Okay.
That's not what they called it. They called it the tercentenary. TERCENTENERARY. Tercentenary. And the funny thing is that as they're talking about this on campus my freshman year, I did not know what word they were saying because they were talking about creating a tercentenary hall on campus.
Yeah.
And I thought it was terse, TERSE, and Tenery, TENURY, as it was named for two people, Tercentenary Hall.
Yeah.
And so I had no idea that that's what they were calling the 300th anniversary, the tricentennial.
Well, again, the bottom line is that there are all of these attempts by the administrative state, by the political class, to redefine issues, redefine history, essentially, right, fundamentally change America. And we don't have anyone, again, I exaggerate to make a point, but there's no organized defense for our side.
This is what I'm getting to, which is we are, as I said, we're on the precipice of this 250th anniversary.
Yes.
And I suspect, now this is the conspiracy theory, I suspect that so much of this is designed towards having this grand rebirth of how we view American history with our 250th anniversary. You think about that 50-year span. Because I don't know about you, Jerry. I know that some of my great love of American history and the principles on which America was founded is because I was 5 during the bicentennial. And my parents took me to Bunker Hill. My parents took me to Williamsburg. I saw 1776. All of these things I was stuffed chock full of.
Now you go in Virginia to James Madison's home, and there's no mention that he's the author of the Constitution.
Right.
But rather there's lots of revisionist history about slavery and all the rest.
I went to college with the person who's pushing this leftist agenda over at Madison's home, Monticello, and
the billionaire.
No, the lawyer who's working on it for him. So I'm not surprised.
Well, the sad thing is that who's the money interest behind this it's not just James Madison's home. There's a $1 billion interest that is looking to do this at historical sites all across the country.
Right. And you're seeing this with our friends at Colonial Williamsburg and how that is panning out for them. I've long said that Colonial Williamsburg should be doubling down on who they are as an organization and the principles upon which they're supposed to be educating the public, and to become a place where conservatives should be going to learn more about these things, but instead they're getting all wrapped around the axle with all of this woke.
Well, the thing is that because again, we haven't mentioned him yet, but Fred Smith, the founder, former president, president emeritus of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, said that the left is vertically integrated.
Yes.
And they are organized and they are well funded.
Yeah.
Our side, my goodness, our side, we had one presidential cycle that broke the conservative movement. And I don't mean that conservatives who supported Donald Trump. I'm saying that there is a whole class of conservatives and Republicans and establishment types who just caved and surrendered and went to the other side.
And at the same time,
and so what hope is there?
Had all of these charlatans and grifters who were able to sort of jump on this, because this is the problem with not having someone who's been there and done that before, is that they have no ability to discern who is there because they believe in doing something and who is there because they want to get their paycheck. Right? We saw this throughout the Trump administration with folks who were undermining what the administration was substantively trying to do, while at the same time folks who just completely screwed up the 2020 election for Donald Trump. Anyway, it is terrible. Jerry, listen, because we're folks, so you all know, we are. I don't have to say we're going on vacation, but Jerry and I are about to go and record a couple of special episodes for next week and the following week. So we're running down the clock here because we got to shift over to that. Jerry, when are you on BAL next?
My Sunday show. So if it's Sunday on WBAL News Radio 1090, 101.5 out of Baltimore. Sundays at 7 to 10 a.m., the best talk radio in all of America.
There you go. I appreciate that. I'm not doing any radio for the next couple of weeks because, again, I am about to go on vacation. But Jerry, I know you want people to plant their feet.
Find the truth. It's getting more difficult to do so, but find the truth, plant your feet, and stand firm. God bless you.
Have a great week, everybody. Have fun and stay safe.